Welcome to the DNX podcast, the number one resource for entrepreneurs, nomads, and impact-driven souls. And I am your coach, SILVIA Christman. Welcome back, everyone. I'm here today with Dr. Kevin Hainline, who is an astronomer at the University of Arizona, and he works with black holes and faraway galaxies. Hey, Kevin, how are you?
Hey, Sylvia, I'm great. I'm doing really wonderful. It's a beautiful morning. It rained last night, and it is fantastically gorgeous right now in southern Arizona. I'm really excited to be talking with you this morning.
Yeah, me too. So we actually met, for everyone listening, Kevin and I met in Barcelona or outside of Barcelona on a mountaintop. And then we recently ran into each other again on another mountain in Eden. And he is one of my favorite people to talk to because it's so interesting to learn about astronomy, but also see what that does for us as a human species, what that means and how, astronomy has amazing capabilities of bringing us all together. So I wanted to bring him on the air because he and I always end up in these long, long conversations about all kinds of interesting things. And I thought it would be amazing to share this with everyone here.
Yeah, at some point, it'd be nice to talk with you, not on a mountaintop.
That's true. Maybe one day, next time it might be a beach. You never know.
Yeah. Oh.
Although you're in the desert, it could be beach or desert.
Yes. But I grew up in Southern California, so I'm very beach friendly. I've only been living here in the desert for the last couple of years.
Interesting. Do you surf?
I did when I lived near the beach, yes.
Oh, so what sports does one do when they live in Arizona?
Oh my gosh. I don't know if I have a lot of time for doing sport out here, but I think that there's a lot of soccer being played out here. And, there's most sports. It's just the thing is that when it gets really, really hot in the summer, you just don't do much. So instead you do a lot of sports in the winter when the weather is perfect.
Oh, that's true. Mm-hmm. So living in the desert, which I'm assuming you are, right?
Yes.
Arizona is a desert. Yeah. Okay. So you have a wonderful, why are you there? Is it because you have a wonderful view of the stars?
So I work here at the University of Arizona, and the University of Arizona was founded in Tucson. This observatory I'm at, founded 100 years ago, when it was pretty important that you're out in the desert, that it's very dark, you're away from major cities. And so observatories were founded at universities along 100 years ago when you needed a dark spot. But nowadays it's more of a historical observatory, and a bunch of astronomers essentially work here. There's actually 3 different astronomy departments at the University of Arizona because of its historical relationship with astronomy. Now it's grown into a modern day relationship with astronomy that includes three separate institutions on campus that all have different aspects of astronomy going on in them. But there are access to telescopes that are here that, a couple hours drive away. So there is still current observing going on mountaintops that are still a couple hours away. But being here in Tucson proper, the city that I live in, it's not super important that it's very, very dark at night for our own observing, because the only telescopes on campus that are still used are used for mostly outreach observing. So the public will come and look through the eyepiece. It's very charming. But for using the actual telescopes, the ones that I use tend to be a little bit farther away. And the telescope that I work on, and the reason I'm here, is because I'm working on a telescope that's the successor to the Hubble Space Telescope called the James Webb Space Telescope. And the main camera was designed and by a group of people here under the tutelage of my boss, Dr. Marsha Ricci, designed this with her team, and then hired me a little bit later to do some of the science and prepare for this telescope. So essentially, I'm working on a NASA project, and when you're an astronomer and when you're many academics, you don't really get to choose where you go. You go where a job has been offered to you. And so my boss offered me this really incredible job working on this NASA project, on this space telescope that's going to be find the farthest galaxies humans have ever found, and totally revolutionize our entire understanding of astronomy. And when someone offers you that job, you say yes. And so it meant that I moved down here, but I absolutely
would say yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
My idea of astronomy is going stargazing with you at night on a mountaintop.
Yeah. And that's one aspect of it. That's something that I really enjoy doing. But most astronomers, they're researchers, and they probably, the stargazing aspect is a romantic side thing. And mostly they're just here for the research. And I love doing research, but absolutely adore like walking people through the night sky, because I think that as human beings, we really try to put ourselves in places like cities with a lot of bright lights, which really remove our relationship to the night sky, something that we've had for most of human history up until only the last couple hundred years when we started building big cities and really urbanizing. We have essentially shut off the part of our brain that like really cared about and admired the stars at night and what it meant to be a person looking up at the stars. Like that was a thing that for the vast majority of human existence, we had such a personal relationship to it that like much world religion was based around it. Also navigation, timekeeping, like our entire sense of place and time was because of the night sky. And only the last couple of hundred years have we stopped caring about that at all, as we replaced the lights of the night sky with the lights of the city, the lights of technology.
Yeah, so for everyone listening, if you ever get a chance to meet Kevin Hainline, you have to go stargazing with him. It's literally one of the coolest things I've ever done. And I got to do it twice, once in Europe and once in Utah, which was both incredible. And it's like, because you have a green laser. Is it a green laser?
Yes, I do have a green laser. The laser is mostly the star of the show. Actually, the star of the show, like I appreciate that. Thank you very much. That's a very nice thing to say, and I really appreciate that you took something from it. But really, the star like is the stars, right? Like all I have to do is hope that the night sky is clear, because that's one half of it, and then the other half, it turns out, is this. I have this powerful green laser that many astronomers who do outreach use to essentially you can follow the beam of the laser because it's bright enough that you can actually see it scattering off of little particles in the air. And so you can just essentially follow where I'm pointing, which makes my job a lot easier. But also people get a huge kick out of the laser. It's like the most exciting thing they've ever seen in their life, like real life light. Yeah.
Every time. Yeah. I want to hear the story of the stars you're talking about. Then I want to see the green laser pointing at it. Yeah. And then I want to hear the group of people cheering because it's so much fun.
Yeah. The show that you saw, there was a chant for the laser, which I think is it's a very weird thing as the astronomer trying to also wrangle them and get them inspired and excited about the stars.
Yeah, there you go. It's the capability, the amazing capabilities that astronomy has to bring people together.
Yes,
right there.
To chant about a laser.
Yes, it is. But so I know. I mean, stargazing and looking at the stars is fascinating to me because, yes, on one hand, it is romantic, and you probably most of us have done it with a romantic partner at some point because it's cool and. It's fun. And by the way, you're getting married later this year.
Yeah, in a couple months. So I can tell you there's one person in my life who does, in fact, understand the romance of the stars. In fact, on our first date, we drove out. This is very much on brand for me and for astronomers. So I apologize to your listeners if you find this incredibly eye-rolling.
Did you dazzle her with your charm stargazing?
We definitely drove out because it doesn't take much to drive out into the desert here to get incredibly dark skies, and just kind of sat on the hood of the car and stared up, and it was wonderful. It's a beautiful thing, and it is very romantic. Not just just for anybody, right? Like just personally, it's romantic, right? Because you can't help but feel something in the face of the infinity of the universe that just spreads out in front of you.
Yeah. And then she fell in love with you and just married you right away.
Well, we fell in love with each other, and yeah, but yeah, we're getting married down here in Arizona in a couple months, which is really exciting. And also, marriages are a lot more work than even PhDs. Let me tell you.
Really? I'm not married.
A lot. Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Very happy for you. That is very, very exciting. So let's go back to the stories of the universe, which I really love because you tie it together so beautifully, and how they were used for navigation, that each culture has its individual set of stories about the same star constellation. Sometimes. Yeah,
I think that's like a really important thing that people often never don't think about or appreciate, which is like for all world cultures, no matter where you are in the world, unless you are like a mole culture or something, like you look up and even, you look up and see these stars at night, right? And the stars for people are dependent on the hemisphere that you're living on. So the people in the northern hemisphere had a set of stars, the peoples in the southern hemisphere had a set of stars. And then, at equatorial latitudes, they kind of had a little bit of the best of both worlds. But essentially it was the same stars. And so what's really wonderful as an astronomer is to not only look at like, the stars from the Western viewpoint, from what the Greek and Roman astronomers kind of set out as the names, but also, and constellations, but also to appreciate the fact that like ancient Chinese astronomers kept incredible star tables. The native people in the Americas, the native people in the, like the Polynesian islands, and the native people in the Australian islands. Like these people all had the exact same stars they were looking at with the same patterns. I really love telling a story about how, Chinese astronomers, 1,000 years ago, like found like that in their star charts, there was a new star that like lit up for a certain, like a month or so. And they were like, well, okay, we should put that in our star charts. And the same thing was being seen by people in Northern Arizona. Like there's paintings on the wall of stars, and then one bright one that comes from around the same time period. They also noticed this new star. What they had found was an exploding star, which we call a nova. And if we go to that spot that the Chinese astronomers kind of ascribed and said, here's this exact spot in the sky, if you go there now, you can see the remnant of the star that has exploded. And like this relationship that happened among people who never talked with each other, which is because everyone cared about this incredible dazzling array of lights above them that essentially like set time itself, right? We used it as humans to tell us about things like when should we harvest crops, and when is the Nile River going to overflow, and when is like this was like our understanding of what a year is comes from how the sun moved with respect to the stars. This is why you care about astrology and horoscopes, is the idea that like the sun is going to be in one constellation one month, and the next month it's going to have moved to another constellation, and they trace out 12 constellations the sun sits in. Well, 13 if you count Ophiuchus, but they didn't. And then you get these 12 constellations that became significant to the peoples who first looked at them. And now we ascribe significance even today as people still talk about what's their sign, right? This is like a beautiful thing that connects us as people. And so often in the modern world, we try to really separate ourselves and say, well, I'm not like that, or we're not like that, or this group of people is like this, but we're like this. And actually, we all come from a same culture of people who all stared up and wondered what the heck is going on above us, and like looked out at these stories and like tried to make sense and borrowed stories from our common ancestors, right? There's a reason that many cultures around the world see the constellation of Ursa Major as a great bear, because it borrows from an early culture like of nomads that saw it and followed bears and hunted bears and saw these stars as a bear. Like that's a beautiful idea of the commonality of human understanding through the stars.
I know, it's so I'm so fascinated by it, because there is a way to bring us all together as a human species by looking at the commonalities of understanding of what is there above us, or what other life forms may be even out there. Do you think there are other life forms out there, Kevin?
So that's a question I get asked all the time. And I think that like we have no evidence right now as scientists. Like we're not hiding any secret evidence or anything like that. That would be like the greatest Nobel Prize winning thing of all time. There's no reason to hide that under a bushel. But I think that there has to be, just because like there's 100 billion stars in our galaxy, 100 billion. And we're finding more and more that planets are incredibly common. And so like, unless life is inherently destructive and can only live for a tiny amount of time, I guarantee you there has to be other life in other, planets in our galaxy, another life in planets in other galaxies. There just has to be. It would be so naive and so self-centered to believe otherwise. We just haven't found them yet. And maybe it's because aliens are steering clear of us for obvious reasons. I don't know. Or maybe we're pretty awful. Or maybe it's hard to communicate across vast distances in space. Space is real big.
Yeah, maybe. So you don't think there's been any contact whatsoever? I
personally don't. Now I think a lot of people are going to have a lot of problem with that and think, well, what about this? But what about this? What about this? But I think that like, I think that right now, as a scientist, I have to say, from the scientist perspective, like there's not any actual evidence that this has been something that, like really any physical evidence that like is overwhelming in support of this. Like there's anecdotal, there's stories, and there's people who say like, well, there's cover-ups and conspiracies and stuff. But like I personally don't believe, especially because of how big space is. Like the ability to travel through space like if you are an alien that can travel through space and come to Earth, then you have technology that's so far beyond anything we've ever experienced here that I think that you wouldn't be excited about seeing us. That you wouldn't like. It would be similar to you like having all your technology and then wanting to go and like look at ants on the ground. And yes, some scientists do that, but I think that like you can do that from afar as just if you have this technology just as easily as, you know, I just don't know why an alien one would abduct us and, you know, put us through tests and then bring us back to the Earth. I think that's like, anyway, this is like, it's philosophical, right? It's just philosophical. This is exactly like, I can like get all flustered, like, you know, pretty easily about this, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like I can see that. Yeah, like why would they want to do that? It doesn't seem like it seems like a waste of time.
I just feel like we're boring. I don't know. I just feel like humans are boring compared with like.
They might be exactly. They might look at us as total primates.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, look, underdeveloped humans.
Very underdeveloped. Even more and more in the modern world, we're really learning how
technologically advanced,
regressive we are in terms of like we think we make these like great advances in social justice and stuff, and next thing you know, you're like, oh, we're still having this debate. And if I was an alien and saw that, I'd be like, nah, steer clear. Let's not. Maybe we don't want to, you know, like get infected with the human disease.
That's true. Oh God, that's so true. So what do you think are the big issues modern astronomy actually is dealing with today?
I think that there's a couple pretty huge issues. One of them is like the pace of research and like, you know, specific research things. Like we're trying to understand this big question, like, are there aliens? What caused the Earth? Is the Earth common or is it uncommon? These kinds of things. But I think we're also grappling, like many places around the world, we're grappling with issues of representation in the field, and like issues that are, you know, like about harassment issues as well. This has been a thing that has not like avoided astronomy. There's been many astronomers who, like, as grad students are coming in and as we're learning to speak up and learning to listen, that are, you know, like many astronomers are having like their Me Too moment, which has been really, really powerful in this field. But I think issues of diversity and representation are kind of one of the things. Last week, the grad students here at the University of Arizona had their first meeting of their diversity group that will meet, you know, every couple of weeks to discuss issues of diversity, essentially to normalize the idea of thinking about like that. And I've been thinking a lot about that because I think that astronomy and academia has a thing where they seem to think that science is a meritocracy, that all the people who have jobs deserve their jobs and got them because of their work alone. And they haven't grappled and only starting to grapple with the idea of privilege. And so I think that that's something that astronomy is slowly coming to understand, is actually privilege plays a huge role, more than it has ever been thought, in terms of who you know and who can vouch for you and who can write your letters of recommendation and who's going to cite your papers. Yeah. And so like I've been really happy to see that like people are talking about stuff like in my field, and most academic fields, when you write a paper, you submit it to be published, and then it's submitted to a referee who is, you know, like not revealed. But I think that there's many astronomers who are talking about doubleblind, where when you get a paper, you don't see who's the author. So you don't know their gender, their, you know, like, and this has an impact in terms of what papers get accepted, you know, and like, I think that that's like super vital. I think going on is looking and understanding where our biases lay and how we can combat those biases, because I think personally that we actually will do a lot better as scientists when we are a more diverse, more representational group than if we just say, oh, okay, the cream will always rise to the top and the best astronomers will always rise up because they're the best astronomers. I think that we do a real disservice if we don't understand how many scientists we discourage in grad school just because of gender biases and just because of misogyny. Then like if we push them away early on, we won't let them be cream that can rise to the top later. And this is one of the big issues outside of, you know, what's the farthest galaxy, are aliens there, is who are the people in the future who are going to be asking those questions and answering those questions. And I'm really pleased that it seems like younger and younger astronomers who come in as grad students, like they have a spirit in them, and there's enough of them that that change is happening. It's just slow, as it is everywhere in the world. But I think that's one of the big issues outside of the big scientific questions about where do we get funding, you know, like what is the you know, what is the role of scientists in astronomy in the future, where we're largely going towards more capitalist models of things, you know, like if you need to fund $1 billion, $10 billion telescope, where does that money come from? Is that from the public? Does the government want to give that money? Like, these are big questions as well. But I think that we're better armed and able to ask those questions when we're more representational and representative and diverse and like come from different backgrounds that can share different experiences.
Yeah. 100%. I had no idea that was such a huge focus on your field as well. And I'm really happy to hear that because it's so relevant.
Yeah.
Do you mind explaining a little bit more what double blind is?
Yeah. So let's imagine that I was writing a paper, and when I submit when I submit the paper goes to an editor. The editor then takes that paper and gives it to a person in the field who is anonymous to me, the writer. That person is some expert in the field who reads the paper carefully, checks for scientific accuracy and follows along with the procedure to make sure it makes sense, goes and looks at the references, goes and looks and sees whether or not like they're accurately portraying that, and then says, here's my comments, and submits those comments back to me. I rewrite the paper. This might go back and forth before it's either ultimately rejected or accepted. And the thing is that there's an inherent bias immediately when a referee sees an author. And it's an inherent bias that is like sometimes subconscious, just in the back of your head, if they see that the author is a woman or an author from some institution that they just don't, they have an issue with. And so a double blind would be a situation where the referee does not know who the author is. The author does not know who the referee is. So when they go back and forth, they're just trying to be as impartial as they can and mostly just make it about the science. Now, this is difficult because often you cite your own papers in your work. So sometimes you can do some digging to kind of figure out, okay, who. But like, it's not as straightforward to figure out, to deduce. And a good referee doesn't try to take that into account. A good referee essentially says, you know what, I'm going to take this paper on its own merits. It's just double blind would like make it completely anonymous to both parties, which would even take the possibility of that out of the equation. Because it could be that you in your trying to deduce, you don't realize actually this is the person you thought is their grad student or their postdoc or something like that. Like it's not the most straightforward. But I think that like that kind of thing or like is pretty helpful. It's hard because you can't do this in all fields, like, or in all areas. Like, ideally you'd be able to do something like that when it comes to hiring. Like but like you maybe don't want to do that because when in hiring, maybe what you want to do is actually take a look at what you have at your institution and what you think your institution needs. I've been in institutions that are heavily male. Many institutions in the country are heavily male, and I think that's a detriment to the institution if they want to take on female grad students who may not want to work with a male advisor and may want to work with someone who's whose interests and understanding and experience in astronomy more echoes their own. And so like maybe you don't want to double blind then because you want to try and make sure you have a representational sample of grad students or of people on your faculty search. But I think when it comes to papers, there's been a lot of research that's looked at like, well, how well is it actually, what does it do? Because, there's research that shows like that women are, preferentially given less acceptance rates because they're just, because of the bias of gender.
Interesting. And it completely changes the way we see the
exactly.
world, if we don't have the right, a balanced, inclusive, and diverse team of people looking at the issues of this, or the modern issues of this world. Yeah, 100%. Wow. I mean, time flies. We're already past our time. Thank you, Kevin. I really appreciate you being there. And for everyone listening, I'm going to put links below so you can find him. And hopefully one day I'll get a chance to go stargazing with Dr. Kevin Hainline.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was wonderful. I appreciate being able to talk about some of the issues in my field and talk with you, Sylvia. I had a really great time.
Yeah. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Take care. That's it for today. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your ongoing support. Before I leave you, I want to invite you into my world. Please go check out dnxcommunity.com. This is where you'll find the other nomads and evaders of convention. We'll see you there. And if you're interested in our English-speaking events, go and check out dnxglobal.com. You'll find the link below this podcast as well. And if you have time, one last favor, please go to iTunes, look for Sylvia Chrisman or look for the DNX podcast and leave a review. Thank you so much, lovely people, and I'll talk to you next time.